Subway. Why are they hated? Have you ever thought that what sort of blunders could a big food chain like Subway commit for people to start hating them? It takes years worth of work and effort to build an empire like Subway. And then there are stories like these, where we get to see all that going down. Today's story is all about Subway's rise from scratch and the reasons it's hated so much, and how that became a major contributing factor into their fall. Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video on my channel. Today we're going to talk about Subway's dramatic stories for why they are hated. I don't know about you, but I carry some very good memories with this brand. So, if you're someone who wants to know what went wrong with Subway, what turned all this love into hate, then stick around to the end and find out. It all started with a man named Fred DeLuca who wanted to become a doctor. Yeah, this story's full of facts like this that make it so interesting. Fred wanted to become a doctor, but due to financial constraints, he had already given up on his dream of joining a medical school. In comes a man named Peter Buck, a distant relative and friend of Fred. So, for Fred, Peter was the last resort, someone who could get him into medical school. And he had hope. Fred went to Peter and told him how he is so passionate about becoming a doctor, but he couldn't get into med school because of money. And Fred certainly thought that Peter would help him with money to assist in his dream. But what happened next is something Fred was not expecting at all. Instead of Peter giving him money to go to medical school and fulfill his dream, he offered him $1,000 to start a restaurant and suggested that Fred could use that money to earn and pay for his way through college. Interestingly, the 17-year-old Fred did agree to his terms and opened a sandwich place called Peter's Super Submarines. After failing on the very first try, both Fred and Peter opened a second outlet. When that failed, they opened a third one, and that finally became successful. This was back in 1965, and after going through a lot of transformations, both in terms of food items on the menu and other things, in 1972, the food joint was renamed Subway. The business was up and running in no time. People were loving their 6-inch long and 12-inch long sandwiches. Their recipes were great. Subway portrayed itself as a brand that was so determined to provide a healthy alternative to all the other unhealthy fast food outlets that customers could get. Subway became a staple food for Americans, and after expansion, it enjoyed the same successes at other locations as well. Since the day it launched, both Fred and Peter were determined to make their business super successful. In fact, the only brand they had in their mind to compete with was McDonald's. To reach the success that they were both looking for, they made some very unreal expectations around their business. For example, during one of their annual expansion plans, they set a goal to open 30 restaurants by the end of the year. And when the milestone didn't look feasible to achieve, instead of giving up and focusing on their current branches, Fred came up with the idea of franchising. I mean, franchising was brilliant, surely, as it helped Subway grow so much bigger than it ever could if it had remained under the direct supervision of the initial owners. But then, it did not take long to understand the flaws that came with forcing an expansion. Everyone who knows a nick about running a business understands that forceful expansion has its issues. It wasn't so concerning that it could have led to the fall of the business, but if a rapid expansion doesn't come with strong structural support and rules, they're bound to fail. Subway was the best case of unstructured expansion, as it's known in the business world as too big, too early. Although, this dream of opening its outlets throughout the states and then going across the world made Subway so big that in no time it left behind McDonald's, as they surpassed the number of locations open. Franchising and the dream of Fred expanding beyond borders worked really well, until the cracks were too visible to ignore. For example, whoever purchased a franchise didn't get any particular instructions, so they started running their business as they saw fit. This meant that every outlet was different, because while Fred was turning his dream of expansion into reality, he forgot that there ought to be some ground rules to make the business successful. Everything was so messed up that Fred started receiving complaints from customers as well as franchisees, because at some point, everyone realized that it just simply can't go on like that. On the other hand, Fred wasn't too concerned because according to him, all the money's rolling in, so there shouldn't be a problem. This recklessness from Fred and the top management got to a point where franchise owners were forced to talk to the media about the flawed business model, violating a clause they had in their contract. that prohibited this behavior. Honestly, the problem wasn't so humongous that it would need external intervention, but the policies that Fred was using to run the business were just wrong. In his pursuit of expansion, he didn't even consider how close two of the outlets were going to be. All that was needed was a franchisee, and Subway would be open. This approach was working for the overall business, as the income that Fred was receiving from royalties was good. The only issue was that it wasn't profitable for the individual franchisees. It was Fred and his flawed strategies that were kind of all over the place. Thankfully, with time, things got better, and a collective strategy was finally formed by the management. It was going wonderful for the business, but after a while, it all started to come down. If you thought that all these issues between the management and Fred that I discussed had something to do with the hate, well, you guessed wrong then. It was part of the process that made Subway reach where it stands today. The real hate came from the consumers, and it had affected Subway quite a bit. What's happening with the business today? Well, let's leave that for the end. But now let's get to the part where we talk about the reasons why Subway is actually hated. It all started when lies spread by Subway through their advertisements started getting exposed. As I mentioned from the start, Subway became the alternative to all the fast food competitors because it portrayed itself as a healthy alternative through advertising. Well, it wasn't only the advertisements that the people believed. Of course, Subway would make it look that way, from baking fresh bread at their store and using fresh meat and vegetables, to asking the consumer to select their own meat and toppings. On top of that, the sandwiches weren't deep fried, so it was natural for people to believe that this was healthy. And Subway didn't stop there. They even got a man named Jared Fogle on their payroll. Jared Fogle was someone who had lost a lot of weight, and according to Fogle, he did that by eating 2 sandwiches a day from Subway. This not only enhanced the image of Subway in the industry, but many others who were looking for a diet to cut their weight, so they began to buy these sandwiches. There was a time when Subway became known for its Subway diet. It wasn't something special, it was the same sandwich, but the way Fogle and Subway portrayed it became something very significant. Every time there was an advertisement where Subway would mention how healthy their food was, Fogle was featured in it, where he could be seen holding his old jeans with a very big waist. Subway was successful in establishing its image, and honestly there was nothing wrong with it if it was true. But as you can probably guess, it just wasn't. And when it was exposed, it caused a lot of trouble for Subway. It first started when one of the franchise owners exposed that the contents used for making a sandwich are far from fresh. According to that report, some of the ingredients received by the vendors were rotten and sometimes 5 to 6 days old. Subway was trying to get it right and rebuild the lost image through advertising campaigns, and exactly then they received another hit. This time it was severe. That hit came from Jared Fogle, who had already become a brand ambassador for Subway, and he was found in some very immoral and implicit activities related to the abuse of children. This was serious, and knowing the severity of it, Subway immediately denied their knowledge about any of Fogle's immoral activities. Fogle was charged and found guilty, and just when Subway thought it was all over, Fogle's wife accused Subway of knowing about Jared's criminal activities and that they kept him on their payroll as they were reaping benefits by featuring him in their ads. This statement caused a serious setback to Subway's image, and they received a lot of backlash from their customers and the industry. This was a major controversy that Subway attracted towards themselves, though not the only one. At this time, Subway's claim to a healthy diet was once again challenged when an Italian food agency analyzed Subway's bread loaf and found the sugar content to be very high for a standard loaf of bread. What this news meant was that not only is Subway not as healthy as they claim, but on the contrary, that their bread was harmful as well. Another issue came forward when a customer went to one of the branches in Australia to order a foot-long sandwich. After he received the order, he had the idea to measure the length of the sandwich. To his surprise, the sandwich wasn't 12 inches long, but rather 11. He took the matter to social media and asked Subway to provide a reasonable explanation. The explanation Subway provided was an absurd one. They said that footlong doesn't mean that their sandwiches would be 12 inches long. It's just their trademark and has nothing to do with the length of the sandwich. I mean, I'm baffled by this explanation, but that's what we got from Subway. If someone starts hating Subway after so much nonsense, they're not wrong for it. All these problems and reasons for hate towards Subway already had an impact on its image, and after all the backlash and controversy, revenue was also going down. And then in 2015, the biggest tragedy fell upon Subway as Fred DeLuca passed away. His death came with a wave of uncertainty surrounding the future of Subway. Co-founder Peter had already died a year earlier, so no one knew who was going to take over for Subway. This uncertainty, combined with the resentment the customers had for Subway, further caused a dip in their revenue. Customers were just not ready to forget the betrayal. I mean, if we rate the health standards of Subway as compared to others, you will still find that Subway is somewhere at the top, but it was not the image that was lost, and the trust was broken. All this cost Subway quite a bit, and as of today, its revenue is down, with a lot of stores shutting down at several locations. Is Subway going to survive all this, and will they be able to build back the image they once have? Well, let's leave that for time to answer. So, that's all about Subway, its journey, and the reasons it's attracted so much hate. On that note, I'll end the video here. I hope you liked it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.